So I am now recording, and today is October 16th, 2019. I'm going to give you guys my teacher look. Hi, guys. Hi there. Okay, 2019, and this is the regularly scheduled meeting of ITSC 2309. Okay, guys, what's going on? Have a seat. Okay, coming to you live and direct from Collin College in beautiful downtown Frisco, home of the Cowboys. Best place in the world to live, I understand. Okay. Anyway, we're talking about some things. Let's say I want to talk briefly about Visual Studio and installing it and what you have to have for Visual Studio. You need a basic installation. So go to Microsoft and look up how to download and install Visual Studio, and do that and get the basic installation down. You don't need anything special about it. And then when you finally do get there and get Visual Studio installed, and it'll look, well, it won't look like this because I've got some other stuff up, but one of your options at the top will be Tools. Okay, so you're going to go to the Tools option, take that, and you say Get Tools and Features, and it'll say yes. You might have to sign up for an Outlook email. I did. I had to get a my own email. Write down your password and all that stuff because you probably won't use it for your email. Okay, I'm going to install two components that I need. The first component, it may already be installed, is the .NET Desktop Development component. So that is blue here, indicating that it is already installed. If yours is blue, you don't need to install it again. One more that probably won't be installed is the Data Storage and Processing. Notice this one is the one that says SQL Server. You need to check that one and install. I recommend install while downloading. Click Modify and go get you a cup of coffee while it installs. You don't have to sit there and fool with it. Once you get it going, hang around a couple of minutes and make sure it doesn't ask you to, there's one more screen that you have to say okay to or continue to. But once you get it going, it'll take about 20 minutes or so. So you don't have to sit there and babysit it. Anyway. And then when you finish, it's finished, everything's ready to go. Okay, and we were talking about, we had a form that we were building the last time, and we talked about the form, let's see. We had our Solution Explorer over here, and here are our forms, and I've got a few more forms that I've been working on, but I have a master form, and my master form just has the buttons on it that take me to other forms, okay? And so if I look at this, for example, insert new player, the only thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over there and I'm gonna say the form insert player .show. Pop up that form, and the form I'm in now, close it. So that just takes me to another form. Then I've got another one that brings me back here. So it's all pretty straightforward. Create game, play around, and another one that's quit. Well, when I quit, I just close everything. Okay. Then I've got my form insert player. Insert player. This particular one, I've been working with it for a little while. I didn't change a whole lot about it, but notice that this one has a player ID, a player name, Joe, Bob, Bill, Tom, and a password. I've kind of taken the password out. I'm gonna leave it, I'll leave that text box in there, but I don't care. I don't have the password anywhere. I don't even have it in my table. The player name, I allow to be null in the table. If you don't want to give me your name, that's fine. If you give me a player ID and that is a unique ID, I'm going to let you come into the game. So all I need is the player ID. And then when you insert the player, when you click insert player, what happens? So there's the form. At the top of the form, I have my import statement. That's going to be in all of them. All right. So notice that. So I believe I gave you this as a zip file. So insert player. It may not be exactly this one, but it's really, really close. So the button insert player, when you click it, this is what happens. I've got a bunch of junk in here where I'm explaining some stuff to you, and I'm saying that you really should check everything you can check. Well, what can you check? The only thing we really care about is the player ID null? If the player ID is null, there is no point in sending it to the database. So there's only really one thing you can check. You can't check to see if it's a duplicate because you got to go to the database for that. So there's no point in going to the database to see if it's a duplicate before you go to the database. I mean, you could, but it doesn't make any sense. So you check it, see if it's null. That's easy to do. You just say, is it null? Is it length? Does it have length 0? If it is, send a message and quit. Okay. The first piece of it is the connection string. This is going to be true in all of them. All of them are going to have a connection string. Connection string is the stuff you need to connect to the database. I am using my ID and my password. You'll use yours. As we develop this, we're going to get away from that because I do not want my ID and my password to be in the web page. This is the web page. This is probably going to get compromised. Therefore, I need to have a generic password that just lets the user do only what they need to do. I really shouldn't have put my username and my password in there, but it was just easier. Oh well, we'll fix that later. Haven't covered that yet. Okay, so what does it have? It's got the name of the server. In this case, it is localhost, but that could be an IP address to someplace in New Zealand just as easily. Right? It can be anywhere. And there's the name of the database. I have to know that, RPS_DB. And I have to know my user ID and the password. So the user ID is going to be some public user ID. The password is going to be a password that even if it gets compromised, it won't hurt anything, or it'll hurt as little as possible. And we'll talk about that in the future. Okay, next I'm going to create the connection. Declare, essentially, a connection, SQL connection, and to get it, I pass it the connection string as a parameter. So this builds the connection. I'm done with that connection string now. I could have just taken this string and pasted it into there, but I thought it was better to do it in 2 steps. I don't know, that's just the way I think. Then, this is the code, SQL as the string. This is what I'm going to execute, the procedure insert player. So as I build it up, and this is going to happen each time. Now that procedure insert player is going to change. If I'm inserting a game, it's going to change. It's going to be procedure insert game. Next block sets up the command, and these guys, let's see, new command, connection, MySQL connection, this guy. Command type is a stored procedure. This is, you follow this, kind of follow it through there. You're going to use these same ones again and again and again with a few minor changes to them. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we turn around. So each one of them is going to have this in it. So this is how that connection gets made to the database. It needs all of these parts. So it's quite, you know, there's a few parts to it, but as you go through it, a lot of it won't change, and some of it will, but a lot of it won't. What will change? Oh, this is going to change. Parameter. I have to know the parameter's name. The name, I have to know. If I don't spell that name right, as it is spelled over in the SQL server, it won't work. If I misspell that name, it won't work. It'll barf. Okay. And what is this? This is the name of the text box that is on my form. Okay, so I'm saying take that text out of that text box and send it over to that parameter. So this is an important little command right here. This is the linkage between the form and the procedure. Everything in here that I'm setting up is that linkage between the form and the procedure. All I want to do is get to where I can call that procedure from the form. So what do I have to do? I have to know my login stuff. I have to know the name of the procedure. So I know my password. I know the host, the password, the procedure's name, that it's a stored procedure, and here I have to know the parameters names. They have to be right. At PID, at PName, and then they're coming from the PID text and the text box PName. I got two of them. I'm not even worried about password. I allow the PName to be null. If you don't put anything in the name, it's going to work just fine in mine. Unless you required that if your database doesn't demand the PName, it isn't going to care. There's an output parameter. The output parameter comes back. Next two lines are setting up the output parameter. It's a little trickier. It takes these two commands because I have to get it back from the procedures. So therefore, I have to set it up. I have to add it. And let's see, what is this? This is of type tiny int. Why? Because it's only 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, it doesn't have very big values, so I don't really care if it's big or not. Make it small. That's simple to handle. Direction is output. I don't know how you would do one that was both input and output. In theory, you could have one that was input and output. Praise the Lord, we don't have to worry about that. I'd have to look up how to do that. And Google is my friend. How do you think I figured all this out? I Googled it. Okay. SQL, so most of this stuff right here, actually it wouldn't be but about 8 or 10 lines of code, which is, this was sent out on an announcement. This was zipped and sent out on announcements. That's fine. Take notes. I don't care. SQL connection is I want to get rid of it as fast as I can. I want to open it. Once I open it, I'm tying up memory. So this guy right here on line 65, this is a very expensive line to execute. Open the connection. Anytime I open the connection, I want to get it done as fast as possible. Execute the command as fast as possible. Remember, he's got his parameters now. I've got the linkage set up to receive the other one. Execute the command. Close the darn thing. I gotta say, it all happens here. That's it. Now, if you're going to get a server login failed, it's going to happen right here in this block. And that's why we're in the try block. If anything goes wrong in there, you get the server login failed. If you get a server login failed, go in there and try to figure out why. Okay. The first thing I would start doing would be I would start commenting it out. I would comment out this middle line and see if it failed when you opened it or when you closed it or something. Where does it fail? and then start going and looking at all of the names of those parameters. That's the most usual reason, is you've got something wrong on one of those parameters. You misspelled it, have them backwards, something. Okay, so the
I think it's stupid, but I'm going to ask. The parameter, for example, we have
tiny int.
The euro.
Okay, tiny int is from 0 to 255.
Correct. But what about if I define this stuff different in the procedure? It's going to be in trouble.
It probably will not work if it is not a tiny int in the procedure. Then it has to, then you don't make it a tiny, if you make it an integer in the procedure, it's got to be an integer here. I recommend tiny int for the output parameter, because you don't need to return very much.
So it doesn't read the value, it reads also the structure of the parameter.
It's fairly fussy about things like that. So if they don't match, I would expect that that's probably the reason. If they don't match and it is failing. Now, it is possible that it would accept it if one of them were tiny int and one of them were int, and you didn't exceed the value of a tiny int, then it might work. I don't know, but I would make them match. Make them match. Be fussy about matching everything, names being perfect, and the data types being perfect. Only time the type matters is in the output parameter. That's the only time it asks you for a type. Okay, if it gets through this, well, if it has an error, it gives you the output of, hey, you screwed up. If it works, now we have finished actually, and what has happened has already gone to the database. It's been put into the database. It's already happened. Everything, the new user has been added. I'm going to go get the FV error level. This is my form variable. So this is a local variable. I go grab what came back and I put it into this variable. I don't have to do this. There's other ways I could do all of this. Everything's happened. Stored procedure has executed. He's in there. Everything's fine, I hope. Or either that, or we've gotten an error by now. So if the only thing that could have gone wrong by now has been the error couldn't make the connection. If it refused the connection, so could be that your SQL server is not running, or it could be that you don't have the right name, or you don't have the right database name. So if I mess up that database name, RPS_DB, if I call it BD, it's going to fail. There's just a lot of things that can go wrong there, and you think it's so easy, and it is easy, but it's not really high tech. You just got to get it all right. Okay, so here I go in on line 75. I go in and I get this guy back. Here I call it a byte, and I make a little note there that when I name something a byte in SQL in Visual Studio, that's the same thing as a tiny int in 0 through 255. So these two guys match, but this really isn't that important, because this is when I'm just taking it back. I don't know what would happen if they didn't match, but it probably wouldn't be very bad. Well, anything goes wrong is bad. And so here I get it back, the parameters dot value. So error level comes back into this variable. Then I dimension this array of strings. Insert failed because the player ID is null. Insert failed because the player's name is null, but that doesn't send you back an error, I don't think. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't remember. I don't think I even have an error on that one. Insert failed to be, oh, here's one because it's already in use. Insert failed, and I don't have a clue why. Contact tech support. The only thing I know is 0, everything's cool. 1, you have a null ID. And I should have checked that one. I should have caught that first one in the form. I should have written that into the Visual Basic. I can write if then else logic. So I would have, you know, that's what I'm saying up here. Right in here is a good place to catch that stuff. Exit, just send them, just go around it, drop down there and give them the message. Don't even bother making the connection. There's no point in making a connection to tell them that a field is null. I can see that. So that's one thing I'm kind of looking for you guys to do. Button back. Questions? Yes.
So would you want the level of detail of like making sure tokens are only RPNS?
Well, we haven't gotten there.
But I mean, would we include that in?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. That's easy to do. Your Visual Basic can check that. Anything that your Visual Basic can check, it should. Okay. There's no reason to make a database. Database connections are very, very expensive. So there's no reason for me to call long distance to Iran to ask somebody if it's R, P, or S. I can do that right here, right in this room. I guess, is it expensive to call Iran? Yes? Okay. Well, I remember when I was a kid, it used to cost dollars to call my grandmother. $1 a minute or something. We had to, okay, everybody, hang up. Every time I say goodbye, every time I hear my mother's voice say goodbye, when my mother was living, we'd be on the phone, and every time she'd say goodbye, I'd expect to hear her say, Stephen, hang up. Anyway, that's I start chasing some rabbits here. Okay, let's go on with this. Now, I've kind of talked about that. And we're going to do other forms. So we're going to have, this is one form. Now, there's lots of things I can do. I have, you can get creative with your forms, and this is good. You can enable and disable things about the form that would be appropriate. It is, I do not expect that you will build a perfect form. I certainly cannot. There are so many little T's to dot and I's to cross that you'll never get it perfect. I mean, just when you think you do, you'll do something, and then you'll have 2 things enabled that aren't supposed to be, and you know, it's very difficult. And you'll see what I'm talking about when you get in there. The programming in this visual environment is an art form. My love in programming is making it work, and then I send it to somebody else to make it pretty. But we're going to try to make it pretty. We're going to try to make it a finished, polished product, even though it's taking just one silly little form, one silly little value, and putting it into the database. So this form takes one value, and you don't have to worry much about the name. If the name is null, it's allowed to be null. The player's name, my real name. If I don't want to give my real name, I don't have to. That's the way I see it. Now, if you've made yours otherwise, that's fine. Make it otherwise. If you put a constraint in the table that says that they have to have a name to go in the table, then you put the constraint in the database, in the form too. But I don't see it as important. You can play the game anonymously as long as you have an ID. Okay. Now, this brings us to the second form. And the second form, I believe, as I usually develop it, is creating a game. Tell me about creating a game. Creating a player is easy, but that's fine. We need one easy to start with. Tell me about creating a game. what do I have to know to create a game? How many players do I have? 2. There's a relationship between them, right? What? 1 game, 2 players. Okay, 1 instance of a game has 2 players. Both of the players have to be in the players table, whatever you named it. I named mine T_players, but that's fine. So I have to check to see that it's in there. Then, what about the second one? So I've got 1 player, so I choose 1 player. Steven, that's me, right? So I'm a player. And what about the second player?
Didn't you mention something last week about the level of difficulty of whether or not the second player is on a different computer?
We're not going to go there
So-
right
so
now.
we are
Let's not
saying
worry
this
about that.
is-
Yeah, let's sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. That throws in a whole different bucket of worms.
So we're sticking
Well, so we're going to stick with 1 computer right now. And if I feel really, really mean, we'll talk about going to another computer. Going to another computer is difficult on SQL Server. It is easier on Oracle, because in Oracle I have a way to look for events that happen on other computers. But that's not as easy to do in SQL Server. Can be done, but it's just a mess. Let's stick with this one. Okay, just a game on our computer, 1 computer, 1 database, 1 players table. Tell me about a game. Players? Okay, so any player can be in a game. So player 1 can be anybody. If player 1 is selected, tell me about player 2. Can't be player 1. Good point. Got to be somebody different. What else? Player 1 cannot already be in a game with player 2. So it has to be a player that isn't already there. So we'll think about that for just a minute. What can we do? Now, the first thing is I cannot reveal the tables to the SQL, to the form. The form the form is not allowed to see the tables. Important point. The form cannot access the tables. The web server is not allowed to touch the tables, cannot know the names of the tables. Okay, security point. If the web server gets knocked over, you cannot have the person being able to run barefoot through the tables because they get into the web server. Right. So they get into the web server, they can't do much except that, well, they can play the game, I guess. Now, how can I stop that from happening? First thing is I'll create a view. And, well, let me bring it up. So, there, that's everybody. Select everything from the players table. That's going to give me all of the players. Then I create a view, which is essentially this. So create a view, public RPS players. Now this is going to be something that the public can see and select from. Why is that any better? Well, it keeps you out of my tables. You don't have access to the player's name. You don't have access to the date. You can't insert into it unless I tell you you can. You can't delete from it. You can't update it. All you can do is read that view and get the players' names, get the players' IDs. So if I say select PID from the view, public RPS players, and say execute, okay, there it is. I get this list of players. That's all of them. And I can grant the public access to this with fair degree of safety. So I need to have this, and then I grant select on this view to public. If you have an older version, 07 or before 2017, you're going to have to use this guy right here, say if object ID, drop view, but it's about the same thing. It's nice to be able to say create or alter. I believe I would upgrade to 2017, but that's up to you. Okay. Now, I have a, if I were to look at the games, let's look at games. So I'm looking at T players. Let's look at games. And it's not letting me blow it up, but I don't know whether you can see that or not, but let's try to look at it. Let's try to look for the player Fee, F-E-E. Okay, Fee is in a game with Phi. Fee is in a game with Fo. Fee is in a game with Fum. I guess that's it. Phi, Fo, and Fum. Okay. So if I want to know, I want to see all of the opponents of Phi, everyone with whom Phi is in a game. That might be a baby step to getting where I want to be. So how could I write that? Who are Phi's opponents? Okay. We'll just go here. Okay, so this is the go. Starts here. Who are Phi's opponents? Go starts a program. Go ends the program. Start, end. Okay. I declare a variable, my PID, as char 16. I think that's what they are over in the table. That's fine. And then I set that variable to Phi, and I say select player 1 from games, where player 2 is not this guy. Union, select player 2 from games where player 1 is not this guy. Put them together, see if they spell mother, and I'll get all of player 2. I think they're all, Phi is always player 1, but even if they were different players, I would still get all of them. And if I execute this whole thing, I'm going to get all of the opponents of Phi, i.e. Phi, Fo, and Fum. Fair enough? Now, why am I doing this? Or what do I need to do that I can't do? I'm not allowed to know about the table. Okay, now, if I can tell you who Phi's opponents are, I could be able to tell you just about the same, just about as easily who they are not, right? I just put a not in front of it, and then I get everybody else. We'll subselect there, nothing to it. So it wouldn't be that difficult to invert it and say, if I know who they are, I can know who they aren't just as easily by very similar logic. Okay, here's where the rubber meets the road. I need to be able to write a piece of code. This code executes, and this code returns to me the answer to that question, who they are, who they aren't, or any other question I want to ask it. But it's based on input. So phi up here, so this guy right there is an input parameter. So I have to be able to say, who are the opponents of, and now I supply you with a name. And your code executes using that name I just supplied you with, and that is a function. So I want a function that returns a table. Why do I need a function that returns a table? Because my code, the code that executes in the form is going to have to say, who are the opponents of this name that is in the text box? So I've got a text box over here, and it's got something in it. I don't know, phi or foo or quux or bos, and it says, who are their opponents? Or maybe more importantly, who aren't their opponents who are in the table? Okay, so it might get a little complicated in the SQL, but not much, because basically this class doesn't have a whole lot of real complicated SQL. Everything's complicated because there's so much of it. It's not that it's any particular part of it is complicated, but we're adding this piece of it now that I need to be able to say, okay, here's a text box. You know, I'm going to write something on the board, and I want you to look at that thing that's on the board and tell me who the opponents of that one are. Or maybe there aren't any. Maybe he's not even he might not even be a valid player. If it isn't, he doesn't have any opponents. Or, you know, who would be his legal opponents if he wasn't a player? Well, there aren't any. So there's, you know, I don't, you might need to worry about that, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. So I give it to you, so I pass it to you as a parameter. That's the important point, because the parameter is going to come from the user. The user is going to enter the name that they're interested in working with into the board and say, can I create a game with this player? With whom? Okay, I have a player, and my player's name is phi. I put that into the board, into the text box. Now, with whom might I be able to have a game? And I need to have a way to get that back, but I'm not allowed to see the table. So if I have to take that out and put it into an SQL statement, remember we talked about dynamic SQL? That would be dynamic SQL. Oh, that would expose me to SQL injection right there. Okay, so now I'm sending something to a table, that I'm sending an SQL string to the table, and about where the table is in the SQL string, oh, I'm just terribly vulnerable to that. So what I want to do is I want to bury all of that information, and I want to build a function. And this is the powerful aspect of the SQL programming language, similar to TSQL, similar to PLSQL in Oracle, which has the same abilities, PHP in MySQL. Allows you to do this. So I'm going to build a function, and the function is not really that difficult, but I hope I have made a case for why we need one. Is the important piece. Okay, well, let's go down to how we get one. Well, how we get one's pretty simple. Create or alter function, and if you're in your older, you have to say you drop them. I like the create or alter better. Function, and you give it a name. And you give it a parameter list, and it's usually one parameter, but it can be 2 or 3 or 10. I've never done one that had more than 2 parameters. What does it return? A table. Returns a table as, and then return, and then an SQL statement. So when you call this function and you provide it with an SQL with an input parameter. In this case, I've kept it the same name, right? It's just like this. It's essentially exactly the same thing. I just copied and pasted this, so that's my input parameter. But instead of having to type it in up there, now I have it up here as the input parameter. This is exactly the same SQL code that I had up above. Exactly. Except instead of using that local variable, now I'm using the parameter. So the parameter is, well, my PID. Does exactly the same thing and returns. There's my go. Remember, I have to have a go at the beginning, go at the end anytime I create. So, okay, well, we remember that. Well, let's test it here. So, execute. It's exactly the same SQL. It created a function out of it. Now, I call the function, and I want to see the opponents of phi. Execute. FIFO and FUM. What other opponents, what else could I ask for from games? What about the opponents of QUX, Q-U-X, okay? Q-U-X. Execute and faux, fum, and giggles. Giggles. Oh, who put that in there? Wasn't me. Is that true? Is that the opponents of QUX? Let's see. Let's go look at it. And QUX, fum, and faux, and giggles. And Boz is in. So I could look up the others, but that's working. So now I can get the opponent. So given any player, and so I could write a form fairly easily. I put the input comes from a text box, takes the text box, puts it into this function, and returns the guys, right?
Do you delete it immediately afterwards so you don't chew up memory?
Delete what?
Like you just created a table on your server.
You know, the answer. What is your name? Tracy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Do I delete it immediately afterwards? The answer to that question is, I don't know. I don't have to delete it.
This in our game, if it served another purpose for later on.
Right, you'd have to run it again.
But since we don't have to use it again,
I'm not saving it, no. I could save it, I could materialize it, I could save it in the database as a temporary table. I haven't really talked about that.
I just wonder when the function creates the table, doesn't it create the table?
Does it create the table? No. No, it does not materialize it. It's like a virtual table. It just exists for that fraction of a second that it's needed to return the values. It exists long enough for me to take those values out and populate the form with them. After that, it disappears and it goes away. It's kind of like, think of it like Visual Basic and SQL work together. And Visual Basic is what we call a garbage collected language. Does that make sense? Do you guys know about garbage collection? When you declare something, when you say new, give me a new connection, give me a new SQL connection, give me a new SQL command. So you've seen this happen in here. Right here, new SQL command. Allocate me memory for this thing. Give me memory. And as soon as it goes out of scope, as soon as it goes away, it's scarfed up by the garbage collector and disposed of, okay? This is good and bad because as soon as I am no longer able to access it, the system picks it up and cleans it up. So when my function runs in SQL, as soon as I no longer have anything using those return values, they go away. They're picked up by the garbage collector. Now, this is as opposed to something like C, a language like C. In C, you say, give me a new pointer, allocate memory to something, to a record, to a structure, to a class, something, a variable. Allocate me memory for this. I say new. Okay, I've got it. Now, that's going to stay there until I explicitly say, dispose of it, delete it. Okay. If I don't say dispose of it, I have what we call a memory leak. And it just stays around and it just eats up my memory. SQL Server and Visual Basic are garbage collected. That means that when I say new, I don't have to worry about deleting it. It's self-deleting. It takes care of itself. The garbage collector people come around, these little guys in trucks, you know, banging their trucks in the morning, and they do something with it. And they return it to the memory store. This is good and it's bad.
Why is that bad?
Why is that bad? You would have to take my data structures class to find out. It's bad because it takes the control away from me. And I am a control freak. And I want to be the one to say when you dispose of, when it disposes of it and when it's not. I do not have that ability here. So it's like when Tracy asked, is it what happens to it? The answer is, I don't know. It's out of my control what happens to it. It happens, I know that I get the answer. I know that I have the answer available to me to populate my, my combo boxes with it. But after that, I don't know. I guess the farmers use it for fertilizer or something. I just don't know. So it goes back, do you know what a pointer means? Sarah, do you know a pointer? You know what that is? That's my finger. A pointer is a memory address. So I allocate a pointer, and the pointer is a memory address, and I say, okay, let there be an integer at that memory address. So I have the memory address of an integer, but I don't really know where it is. Actually, I do. I can read the pointer. But so what happens to it if I point it someplace else? What happens to that integer? It's still there. In a garbage collected language, it's gone. But I point to it, so it's very difficult. I cannot allow, if a garbage collector, I cannot allow the user to control that memory address. Because if I do, then the user will have another pointer, and that pointer points to this pointer, and I'll never know when I can find, and then another one to another one to another to another one to another one, and you know, and then I'm in this. I can get this loop of a pointer to a pointer to a pointer to a pointer to a pointer, and they make this circle and come back, and I cannot let the user control them. If I do, I never know when I can throw them away. So the user has to do it. So the user either does it. It's kind of like if I'm gonna let my accountant control my checkbook, I have to give that accountant full control of the checkbook, or I have to do everything. One of the two. There's no halfway measures. And then along came C#. Anybody knows C#? C# allows you to kind of have feet in both worlds. But we're not teaching that. Anyway, Visual Basic is garbage collected. So what happens when this table returning function executes? What happens to the table? Quién sabe. But it's dealt with. Okay, and usually it's fairly efficient. It's a pretty efficient. Okay. Boom. So here is the, here's the function. Of the opponents. But I don't want the opponents. I want the opposite. Hmm? In a table function? Is that what you said?
Well, the opposite meaning, but yet it still has to be in the table players.
Yeah. So given that I select somebody from the table players, so if I selected Phi from the table players, I want to see everybody but Phi, Fo, and Fum. Okay, well, so what's so hard about that? First of all, it can't be the parameter. Well, I don't know. Let's go down and look at it. Here, I do it right here. Here's my SQL. PID from players where, well, it can't be me, and PID not in, and this is the same code that I used up there a minute ago to get the one opponents, where it's not an opponent, not me and not an opponent. Well, okay, that's pretty much everybody else. Possible opponents, a little bit longer. You have to put the DBO dot on there. I don't know why. Okay, I'll put it there. DBO is database owner. I don't know why you have to specify that. That's the schema. We'll talk. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I don't know. There's so much stuff to talk about that we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about that. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I'm expecting to see everybody that's in that table except for Phi, Fo, and Fum. And so when I execute this, I could blow that up, but I do not see Phi, I do not see Fo, I do not see Fum, and I could show you the same thing with Quux. Okay, so how's this going to work? Well, think about it. I have one view, and I don't need to know about the view. All I need to know is the view's name. I don't need to know anything about the view to select from it. I just give me them all. Okay. So I haven't really exposed anything. I have a view that gives me everybody. And then I have a function that gives me everybody with whom they can be in a game. Okay. I guess I made any changes. I don't remember changing anything. Okay, start. Create a new game. The way I see this working is with combo boxes, 2 combo boxes. Now, I like combo boxes, but if you like something different, you may do it any way you wish. You're going to need to look up the properties of a combo box. So a combo box has a name. It's like, I think I call it CMB, and then player 1 or something. CMB I think is combo box. I start mine with something that tells me what it is, and we'll look at it and see in a minute. So I've got a player 1 on the left, player 2 on the right, and there's maybe you want to do it differently. Maybe I'm doing it as simply as possible. Player 1 on the left gets populated when the form's loaded, and we'll talk about that. So if I drop down player 1, I get all the players. All of them. Where does that come from? It comes from the view. So there's a SQL select from where that hits the view, pulls back all of the players. Okay, I have to know about the view, but I'm okay with that. I'll let the fact that that view exists be compromised. Yeah, I'd rather not, but hey, you know, you got to open the door someplace. Now I choose some player. Let's say I choose Phi. When I choose Phi here, I go to the other one, and the other one runs on the opponents that could be of Phi. Now, who were the opponents of Phi? FIFO and FOM. Notice that FIFO and FOM are not in there. So who will Phi choose to? How about Ted? So we're going to have a game with Phi and Ted. And when I say create game between Phi and Ted, I mean, you know, I make it work. I don't make it pretty.
We make it difficult and
What?
put in something that's alphabetically before P. I want to see what it's going to do.
It shouldn't make any difference alphabetically before. The combo box will take care of the arranging it. You can, in the combo box, I think you can sort it. There's a lot of things you can do. Before Phi, you mean like A? Yeah. Okay, a B. Okay, I'm gonna go create the game. Oh, it did create the game. So by that, in fact, you know, if it created the game, then I should be able to go over here, and I should be able to look at the games from all games, and I should find Ted and Phi and Ted. Phi and Ted is the last one right there. Phi and Ted are now in a game, and they're in the table. And if I were to Phi, if I were to drop down this again, I don't see Ted. I probably should, let's see, let's go back to Phi, where there's Phi. Now notice that I no longer have Ted as an option. I probably should have figured out a way to reset that where I took Ted out. I probably should have cleared the text. And there's ways you can do that, okay? That's kind of fairly simple stuff, and I'm going to stick to the larger idea of where do these data come from? On the right, and you could do some weird stuff with, you know, if this one is empty, take that one from the view, else if this one is empty, take that one from the view, and you can get weird with it. And what were you, Tracy, what were you saying? You wanted to do Phi and what? Boz?
Yeah. So that box is going, so our Visual Basic is going to always display it as Phi is the first player.
It's gonna go in that way because I've got the one on the left is coming from a view. The one on the right comes from the function, the table returning function. So whichever one you select on the left is going to be on the left. Whichever one you select on the right is going to be on the right. Now, when it inserts it, what's going to happen is that when we look at the code, notice that now it's Boz and Phi, so they've been switched because Boz comes first. So Boz will be player one because when we insert it, when the procedure inserts it, the procedure looks at them and says, if player two is greater than player one, swap them, or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know, but the procedure puts them in order for the table. So the Visual Basic doesn't care. It just passes them off to the procedure. The procedure checks to make sure they're in order. If they're not in order, it puts them in order. Then they go into the database, and the trigger checks to make sure that they're in order. I don't think the trigger is going to put them in, I think if they're out of order, the trigger throws an error. I don't remember. Don't shake your head at me.
I thought we said that wasn't severe enough to be a trigger event because it's something that
The procedure should have caught it. Anything that the procedure should have caught that gets through the procedure is an offense. If we catch it in the procedure, right, we don't care. I mean, that just happens. So that got caught in the procedure. And so it's not an error. It's not a database error. If I were to send it a null player, that would get caught in the procedure. That's not a big deal. It means that somebody isn't playing with our little interface here, because there's nobody that's supposed to be able to send it. They're not supposed to be able to call that outside of this nice little sandbox I've set up for them, but they will figure out how to get out of that. So I'm not going to get too worried if somebody feeds bad data to the procedure. It's when bad data gets through the procedure and hits the trigger that I'm going to start logging it. Okay, you want to see the code then, I guess? Well, what happens here? No, not that one. Not you. I don't want to see you. I want to see the create game. Okay, the combo box is you pick it up over there. It's like a text box, but it's a combo box. CMB first player.
Verification in the procedure, because for example in the game procedure we are checking that the connection is not repeated. Over there we won't get that repeated connection.
Exactly, but remember that the form is not trusted.
Okay.
The form is out there, open to the world, so to speak. The form is running on your attacker's computer, so they will be able to break into that. Anything that's in that, including my user ID and password, by the way, as it is now, is considered compromised. Now, they're not supposed to be able to see that, because I'm going to send it to them, just the form, just that running part. So that's all I'm going to send them, and they're going to be able to run the executable part. They won't have the code. So it's like I give them the .exe that they can install, and now they can run. The window will pop up, but they won't be able to see the executable code. But you know how people are. They're going to hack into it probably, and they'll find a way that they'll have the compiled code, and they'll find a way to decompile it if there's any money in it. And they will get that password, and they will get that username. You just assume that. So I have to block anything, given that they're going to have that. I have to block them from doing any damage. Besides, they can play the game, but all they can do is they can call the procedures. Oh well. Okay, let's take a look at the code. The code is, I start off, I chose to have a subroutine on the form load. So when you open the form, I go ahead and populate the combo boxes. Okay. So when the form, and to populate the combo boxes, I have to have a connection. Make sense? I mean, I gotta go read stuff from the database. So I set up what do I have? Well, just like the last time, nothing new there. Just like the last time, nothing new there.
How expensive is going to be that connection?
It's the most expensive thing we've got. It's, I mean, how expensive? I don't know compared to what.
You are going to keep the connection open until you finish. Yes or no?
No, I'm not. I'm going to open it, populate, and get out.
Okay.
Okay. Now, there's different ways of thinking about it. There's different places you can put it, and if you want to do, you can do some research on it, on the scope of this language. And there are other places I can have this connection besides in the procedure. I can have it up at the form level where the connection exists. There's only one connection, and all of the procedures use that one connection. So it's opened and maintained throughout the running. And the question then becomes, well, which one do you want to have? Okay. There's other ways to do it. I'm just demonstrating one way, and probably the simplest way. The simplest is not always the most efficient, but it is a way to do it. So you're going to have to do the same things anyway. Then in that case, you would open the connection, make the connection, and then the procedures down when you press the buttons would simply, so this part of it would live up above the form, and when you press the button, it would just do that. So and it wouldn't close it. And so at the end, when you close the form, it would close the connection. So the connection could stay open as long as the form was open. I just didn't build mine that way. I'm trying to build it simply. I'm trying to get it running. Okay, what's the same? Okay, same stuff, except this one is SQL is a string, and instead of a procedure, this one is calling actually the select from where. We are not vulnerable to SQL injection because I am not sending the SQL string across the connection. The user is not building it. I'm building it right here. New command sets up the static connection. So this one is a little bit different right here. The command type instead of a procedure is text. So this is line 29 is the first difference we've seen. All the rest of it's the same. Copy and paste. That's what I did. Command text. Now it starts to get a little bit different. I have a my adapter as new SQL adapter, and don't ask me what an adapter is. I'm learning this too. Okay, so every time I turn around, I have a new language to learn. This is a new one. But this works. And so it provides I copied and pasted this, provides the communication between the data set and the SQL database. We can use object in combination with the data set object. And here is the data set object. And this is the set of rows returned by the adapter. And all of this is fairly new. So these guys right here from line 32 through 38 are different from the way that they were in when we were just taking text out of a text box and sending it straight into the database. This one, it's talking back and forth, so we have to have a little bit, it's a little bit more complicated. That is the code that will do it. Open the connection. myadapter.fill, that's a little bit different than executing the command. So it's filling the combo box. Close the connection after it fills the combo box. combo box. CMB first player is the name of the combo box. My data set table 0. I Googled that one, and that's how they did it. So the first player is PID. The second PID, first player, display member, player PID. This is the value, and this is the what's up above it. So as we run it, so that ran right there. I'm not sure where this second piece comes in. I'm not real sure what this is. Anyway, that's how they get populated. So when the form loads, they get populated. You open the form, the combo boxes come to you already populated. Or it populates the first one. It populates player 1 is what it does. Now, how'd player 2 get populated? Good question. Now, will you agree with me that when the form populates player 1, the first player, his value changed? That causes this event to fire. Well, his value changed. Oh, the value, it wasn't anything, and now it's full of data. So it was nothing, and it changed from nothing to whatever it was after it loaded it. It put the first one in there. So right here, the data set, the first one, position 0, goes into that as its text value, and its value member is the player ID, and I'm not sure what this one is, but and that changed it, so it's like Boz or AAA or whatever the first one was, if they're in order. It changed. It was empty, and now it's got something in it. So it changed. That causes this one. Its value has changed. Therefore, this one executes. What does it do? Well, we know about that. Opens a connection. SQL. What's this? Okay. Dimension S1 as string gets what does that say? Think about it. Look at me like that. It's okay, Sarah. What does that say? S1 is a string. What does S1 get? The text that's selected. What's selected? The first player. So that's the player. So when I run it, new game, right? What's the first player? Boz. So that's the value of that text box. That's the first one. 0 goes in there. That's what that changed it. So S1, what's S1? S1 is Boz. String, select PID. This is the this is the function. Passes S1 to it and says, show me all the people that Boz can be in a game with. If you change it to something else, it gets passed, a new value gets passed in, and player 2 changes. So the drop-down menu changes. Okay, so here we sit. New command. So each time that each time that player 1 changes, the second player gets recalculated and refilled. So if you change player 1, so right there, he came up and he was, and player 1 was filled by when the form opened, and that changed player 1 to Boz, from nothing to Boz. So that changed player 2, and now player 2 is all of them that Boz can be in a game with, all of these. If I change Boz, and I want to find out the player that Fee to Fee, boom, player 2 just got recalculated. And it's now all of them except Fee. So so basically this is now I can questions. They're pretty much the same thing. They're pretty much just the same thing as the button that inserted the player. There's a few differences, and the differences happen. The differences is here in the command that I'm executing. I'm selecting it from that. The type is text, whereas the type of the other one was a procedure call. This is not a procedure call. This is a text executing. This line is different. This line is different, and this line is different. The rest of them are the same. This line is a little bit different right here, line 90. And then we take the values and use them. And if you'll think about how a combo box works, look at the properties of a combo box and Google a combo box. What are the properties? So basically it is an array of strings. So your position 0 is the one at the very top, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on through the end of it. So you can talk about position 5, if there is such a thing. I never do. You select one of them. It's good because it validates them for you. You don't have to say, it can't be null. Null is not one of your options. If you select a player 1, all of player 2s are valid for player 1. So you don't have to ask if they're good. They're already good. They've already been checked for you as far as the web page can check them.
What does your box do if you try to drop down player 2 before you select it?
I don't think you can do the drop down from player 2 because it populates player 1 on form load. Well, you have no way. If you load the form, when the form loads, it populates player 1. The fact that player 1 got populated causes player 2 to get populated. If you go over here first, those are valid players. So that is a valid pair. Well, I don't know. You're asking, is there a way to get around it? There might be. Now, I don't know what's going to happen if I choose, let's see, Quux. Who can't play with Quux? Quux cannot be in a game with Thumb. Okay, so Quux and Thumb are already in a game. So if I were to take Thumb, that's going to give me an issue there. So it won't, as soon as I choose Thumb, it repopulates player 2 with valid players. It's pretty kind of it's paperclip proof. Let's put it that way. Could you get through it? Yes. And I'm not really worried about a web interface. I want my web interface to be robust, meaning I want people to be able to use it. I'm not interested in it being a high security thing. My security comes over in the database. So the web interface is my first layer of security, but it's a very weak one. No, people are going to get through it.
But even in the procedure, the game procedure, we have a question that if the connection already exists, we give them a message.
In the game's procedure,
In the game.
the procedure in the database.
Yeah.
The procedure in the database doesn't know anything about the Visual Studio.
No, I'm saying it with the two games, the two players.
Okay, the two players.
We check it at the table if the connection.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to go into the function, and I wanted to return an invalid value there deliberately. And I could say, you know, union, and then I could put one at the bottom, invalid, and just return that. So then it would carry through into the procedure, and you would be able to select it. And the procedure would, and the Visual Basic wouldn't know. So it should be just like if you typed in, if you executed that procedure and typed in an invalid value, it should just kick it out and return a number that says, I'm sorry. I suppose I could add it to the function. I would just add it to the SQL by which the function is created. So I would say union select, and then at the very end I would say union select invalid. And so then it would have that value invalid in there, and it would return that. And if I selected that, then it would be an invalid game with an invalid player. And so that would be a way to test it. I can try that. It should catch it just fine. If I go to the SQL, yeah, a reasonable number. I was just wanting to do a little bit of programming there in terms of the error messages. If you just catch them with if then else logic, I'm okay with that. Maybe if you just, I don't know, even if you just return 0, 1, 2, or 3 would probably work. Let's see. It's really not. Let's see. This is user-friendly. We don't say user-friendly anymore. We say it has a robust human interface. Not in where select PID. Let's see, how am I going to put in an invalid value? I can't put it into the interface because that would be not in. Select yeah, it would, wouldn't it? Okay. You're right. That'll give me an invalid. So fee will be invalid. That'll be good. So we'll just we'll run this. Execute, and he runs. And now we will start him, create a new game. We'll choose Phi. Now, Phi should appear in as player 2. And there he or she is. Now we have an invalid set of data coming through.
Does it come through before you hit create game?
No, I have to hit create game before it's submitted. The create game submits it. Right now, I haven't. Right now, they're just. I've taken some stuff from the database, populated my form with it, but that's all. So if I say create the game and Phi failed because it's invalid. Mhm.
Where's the code that has that statement?
The code that has that statement?
Yeah.
It's in the, remember, what does it do? Let's, how do we get it in there? The create game button. When I click that create game button, what does it do? This is the same stuff. What does it do? Look at this. Hey, the same stuff, same stuff, same stuff, except here's the procedure insert game. The code that kicked that out is in that procedure insert game. So if I went over there, and so this is what gets called. So if I went over there and looked at the insert game, right there.
So that string is a string
It wasn't just, no, the string didn't come, the two came back. So when I tried to insert that invalid pair, it hit this one right here. If P2 ID is P1 ID, come back to with an error level of 2. And then what happened there, it came back here, it went in and it came back here as a 2. And because it was a 2, that was the error that it displayed. So that's what I was saying, that in an SQL programming environment, you very, very rarely have your SQL procedures doing any output. SQL code very, very rarely does any output. It just simply returns an error code and lets the web interface handle the output. So basically, you just come back with a 1, a 2, or a 3.
Thank you for walking where it was.
Yeah. Well, that's where it catches it. And so if I put an invalid one in there, I mean, that one was invalid because they were the same. But maybe I put something in there. I managed to get, and I could get it there if I thought about it for a little while. I could put something that was not in the players table in there. I mean, I could force it in there. And then that one would get caught at another point in the function. So in the procedure. So it's the procedure's job to stop that stuff. And notice that one never even got logged. That one wasn't considered a severe error.
You know what? We didn't get the right one because it should be error message 1.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's a problem here. Basically, that's just a problem with the way those are set up. Yeah. It's coming back with a 2 when they're identical. So, okay, then take this and put it down there at 2. Just switch those error messages. That's just the ordering of the error messages. Basically, I wrote this last year. This code's been around for a while. So I'm reusing the stuff that I know works. And I still don't know what some of it is. But I went through it and I wrote it and got it working. And I fairly well understand why it works. And so I guess it's your problem to polish it. So you have to write the function. I will give you the Visual Basic code. I don't know that if I give you the code, it'll probably have the next one in it, the create game, but I don't know that that's going to run. I'll probably have to go through that and get through it and fix everything that's wrong. Variable names get changed and stuff. If I were to go look at that, but right now, are we fairly well clear on what's happening in this thing? I think combo boxes are the best way to go. They're going to validate it for us, and they're going to do a lot of the work for us. And we just have to get the combo boxes running. And so I'll give you this code. There's the back. I don't know what this is. Combo box first player selected, index changed. I don't know what this is. This doesn't have anything associated with it, so it's not doing us any good. It's just sitting there. There's only 3. There's a back button. This is the do it button. I always like to name the button do it. So when you click this button, this is what happens. Now I have to have on the others, I have to have a connection in here. So when you load the form, it has to make a connection so it can populate the combo boxes. If you change one of the combo boxes, then it has to, if you change combo box 1. Now if you change combo box 2, notice that doesn't provoke in my world, changing combo box 2 does not cause a database connection, right?
It makes sense because everything in 2 is connected with 1.
Right. 1 is the driver of everything. So if you change 1, all of 2 gets repopulated. But if you change 2, the only thing you're allowed to change it to is something that already matches with 1. If you change 1, I guess you could work on that. And, why do something the easy way when with a little bit of thought and consideration, you could make something that is much, much harder out of it. Don't you agree, Sarah? Do you agree? Why do something the easy way when you can make it much harder? Sarah, you look like you're tired today. Okay. What time is it? Goodness gracious. Okay, I'm about my limit of sitting still. What was I going to say? Oh, I was going to show you, I guess I'll show you the third form. I'll probably go ahead and give it to you. Say again. Save everybody. Okay, this one, that's the insert round. Now, inserting the round is really where the game gets played. But when you think about it, the game is getting played at the Visual Basic level. Visual Basic is playing that. Visual Basic is saying, hey, the winner is player 1, the winner is player 2. And then it could also, it'll know what the player's name is if you want to add that. So play around. I see buttons, rock, paper, scissors, and I've had people put icons on there for rock and an icon of a pair of scissors. Yeah, that's fine. I didn't. I don't know. I call mine Echo 1 and Echo 2. I don't know whether that'll run or not. Let's see. Play around. Cannot open connection. Okay. Okay, I'm not sure what Echo does. I'll have to go look at it. I'll let you look at it and see if you can figure it out. The connection, why can't it open the connection? Why can't it open the connection? That's okay. Oh, look. The user ID and password are different. We're going to have to change the user ID and password to something that is public. So I think that might be our next task in here, to get that settled down, because I don't have a user named public user, but that's what we want, is a public user. What can public user is only allowed to execute procedures. I have to write down the things that public user can do. Execute procedures. The public user can select from the view. The public user can, I'll need to check what can the public user do with that value returning function. I don't know whether it needs execute or select on it with the table returning function. I think you have to have select on that. But basically, I just give you just the basic stuff that you have to have. Then anybody that's public, means anybody, can execute it. So you log in as public user, password, and okay, well, if somebody gets access to that password, they don't have any more access than everybody else that's in the database. And that means that they can, so anybody that's in the database, that's a user of that database, can execute those functions, but you can't see the tables. You can't insert into the tables. You can't see the tables. You can't select from the tables, but you can execute the procedures. And that's the whole idea. Questions? No. Is that enough for one night? Okay, I'll put this out. I'll zip up the, I'm not going to give you the SQL code to create the functions, but you've seen it. It's on the recording. So you can go back and look at it, but you'll have to write your own code to create the functions. They're not that hard, pretty simple. Actually, they're a lot simpler in SQL Server than they are in Oracle. Okay. I'm going to end the recording. Anybody, do I have anybody online? Got 5 people online. Okay, online people. You got everybody go to sleep out there?
Nope, still awake. No questions.
Okay. Anybody else? I'll leave it. I'll leave the. I'm going to end the recording now. I suppose I can always start the recording again if anything comes up.